ABC News coverage of Operation Sail will continue after this and a word from your local station. Reagan make their way by helicopter from the USS Iowa here to Governor's Island, where they will take the salute of Operation Sail, a remembrance of the great age of sail, which, as we all know from our history books, may have begun with Christopher Columbus in terms of this country and ended as recently as 1957. Revel, we're going to hear a lot of, we've already heard quite a few phrases I think people may not understand. First of all, what's a tall ship?
Well, there is no firm definition of that. I think it was coined by Masefield the poet, remembering the line of all I want is a tall star and a tall ship and a star to steer her by, if we can get our lines straight. But I think that's where the tall ship name comes from. But generally, for these activities, the tall ships of which we're speaking are those that can't sail under the Brooklyn Bridge. Brooklyn Bridge has a height of about 125 feet above water. And so ships that cannot get under that are those that are classified as the tall ships here.
Okay, but let me just get this clear. The tall is the height of the mast or the length of the ship?
It really doesn't matter. Height of the mast is what is defining the tall ships for this kind of an event. Those that cannot go up the East River under the Brooklyn Bridge. And under, what, can they get under the George Washington Bridge? Yes, they can. I don't know the height of that span.
They can certainly get under the Verrazzano's Narrows Bridge.
We know that. We know that.
There they are, some of them with their sails flying, though the wind is against them this morning, so they are under power as well as under sail this morning. Now we've got Class A tall ships, Class B tall ships. What's the difference?
Well, there's a bit of a shuffle in all of these. What they're doing, the Class A's are the generally 170-foot and up vessels, but there's a bit of a shuffle as in the center line of the first 24 tall ships coming up. There are some smaller ones, but that was a diplomatic decision, trying to make sure that the nations were properly represented.
Well, let's go and take a closer look at one of them. One of the most popular and one of the ones that has become most familiar to Americans because it has been here before is the Danmark, which is a training ship in Denmark. It was given to this country, or lent to this country, back in World War II as a training vessel for 5,000 young sailors. They had a rather windy night out there outside the harbor at Sandy Hook, and ABC's Richard Threlkeld joined her, and before long we've got a camera on board the Danmark, and we'll talk to Richard Threlkeld about how the young seamen on board the Danmark, who's 252 feet long, have enjoyed their night and are enjoying their day. Now let's try to hear from him. Richard? No, Threlkeld. Not going to have a chance to talk to Richard Threlkeld in just a moment, so we'll tell you just a little bit about the Danmark. As I said, she's one of the most popular ships. She's a windjammer, and she has been here before. She participated in Operation Sail in 1976. She's a ship, and she's full-rigged. Now, Rebel Carr, what does a ship full-rigged mean?
Well, that means she has 3 or more masts and square sails on each of those masts. And the differentiation from that is a bark, which would be 3 or more masts and square sails on all but the last mast. So when there are square sails on all 3 or 4 or 5 masts, that is a ship rig.
Okay, we're going to get that figured out before the day is over. The Danmark is sails out of Copenhagen every year, and now let's try for Richard Threlkeld. Good morning, Richard.
Hello, Peter. I was trying to tell you before, we're on the stern of this vessel. We spent the last 2 days here, and it's been absolutely magnificent. It reminds me of one of those lovely old Currier and Ives prints from the 19th century of New York Harbor, just a forest of stars and bars and wooden sailing masts. The 80 cadets, Danish merchant marine cadets, have been having a very busy time of it. Life is no picnic on a vessel like this, but this is the last day for them. They will be on their way home very shortly after their 6 months of training, and will become, most of them, officers in the Danish Merchant Marine. Most important, after several weeks at sea, they're going to have liberty at South Street Seaport tonight if there's any room for them. You'll notice not only we, but many of the ships have begun to break out some sail, so even if there's the slightest hint of the breeze, you're going to see a forest of white as we go up the Hudson. Peter?
Richard, thank you very much. Lucky you having a nice day under sail as the Danmark makes her way up from lower New York Bay into this harbor. 23 tall ships we will see before this day is over, some enormous like the Danmark, some tiny, but all romantic and all evoking history. We'll be back in just a moment. Over Governor's Island, that is, and over Manhattan Island, that is the fire station at the tip of Battery Park on Manhattan, once again on land that wasn't always there. But that curve you see on your screen was once called Battery Park because it was where the gun batteries were kept. And it is where thousands of people have gathered this morning from all over the country and, quite frankly, from all over the world. They've come for a variety of reasons, and they have been enabled to come here for a variety of reasons. Lynn Schur is standing with Rick and Kay Smith. Lynn?
Peter, you and I were lucky enough to get here because we're working here. I'm with two people who came here because they won a trip to New York as a prize. Rick and Kay Smith are from Rancho Cordova, a suburb of Sacramento, California. Rick's a truck driver. Kay's a sales clerk. Rick, tell me about your 7 days in New York free of charge. How's it been?
So far, it's been great.
What have you done?
Oh, we went and seen,
Cats.
can't think,
Little
Cats.
Broadway show?
We went and seen Cats. That was great. It's everything that I thought it would be.
Okay, Kay, you're the one that actually won this big prize. Tell me how it happened.
Well, I just filled out an entry form every time I went to the store to shop, and mine happened to got picked, along with 10 others. So.
This was at the supermarket. Did you expect something like this from the supermarket?
No, they're always having some kind of contest around Sacramento, and this happened to have been one of them, and I just happened to have been a lucky one, I guess.
Okay, tell me about your weekend. What is it about the Statue of Liberty that made you want to enter that contest and obviously win it?
The excitement of getting to see her after all these years of seeing pictures of the boats and the immigrants coming over, and it's just, it always brought tears to my eyes to see that, and I thought it would be a good time to come see her.
And has it lived up to your expectations?
Oh, yeah. I just hope I get to go and tour it tomorrow.
Okay, so do we. Rick and Kay, thanks very much. And Peter, we have some more prize winners here in the gallery in the grandstand, and we'll get back to you later with some of them. Peter?
Thanks, Lynn. Kay Smith was saying that she hopes to get to see it. We should tell you that the Statue of Liberty will be open to the public, I think it is tomorrow or the next day, and we'll absolutely clarify that for you because it has now been completely refurbished in every respect. That'll tell you the sun is out today as people begin to put on the lotion. And we should remind you on July the 4th, if it isn't too preachy, about the possibility of skin cancer if you expose yourself too long to the sun. Kay Smith was also saying that she had filled out an entry form and it never occurred to her to come to the Statue of Liberty particularly before. That's rather like Lee Iacocca, the man who's done so much to get the Statue of Liberty restored. He admitted that before the president asked him to help with the refurbishment, he had not been there since he was a child when his father had taken him. He said it didn't mean the same thing to him as it did to his father. That, of course, was before he was involved. About 1.5 million or 2 million people visit the statue every year, and it is all now designed, including, we must tell you, designed better for the handicapped than it has been in the past. So if you happen to know or are a handicapped person, you have no need to be concerned about coming to see the Statue of Liberty. Rebel car, what was that we were looking at? I apologize for going on
I think
there,
that was Libertad. It was a little hard to tell from that angle, but I think it was the Libertad.
Now, can you tell what kind of a ship that is just by looking at her sails?
She is a full-rigged ship. As you count, you can see 3 masts, and you can see the square yards. The square sails are not set, and that is a function of the wind.
There's a full-rigged ship. What do you call the square sails? On all square sails?
Well, they all have individual names. On the foremast, there's the forecourse, which is the lower one, and the 2 sails above that are upper and lower topsails, and they are made, you could have 1 sail in that area, but they're made smaller to handle them more easily. And then above the topsail, there's a topgallant, and above the topgallant, there's a royal.
Sometimes called the skyscraper, which is how these enormous buildings got their names skyscrapers. They were originally that name taken from the very uppermost sail on some of these tall ships. They are under power today as well as under sail. Yesterday was a magnificent sailing day in the harbor, but looking at them now in a somewhat more leisurely way is every bit as gratifying. We talked a little earlier about the Amerigo Vespucci, the tall ship from Italy. ABC's Ray Gandolf is the lucky fellow on her. Ray?
We are number 13 in line, Peter, and we got underway about 40 minutes ago, and it looked for a while as if it were going to be Operation Diesel for us here today. It may still turn out that way, but about 25 minutes ago, along about 10 o'clock, the men went aloft, the cadets and the seamen, and began setting the sails and squaring off the cross arms up there, and they may give it a shot. Some of the ships, those with triangular sails primarily, are partially rigged, and a lot of the ships have sail out there, and there's not much wind, but I think we're going to give it a shot. Back to you, Peter.
Well, some years ago, Ray, when sail was the mode of power around the world, you look forward to, because in a windy day it was a dangerous and nasty life to lead. The food was awful, the conditions were terrible. Today it is glorious. There's the yard arm, Revel Carr. What are those men doing up there?
Well, I think what they are doing is the equivalent of what we saw on the Iowa. We saw people manning the rail on the Iowa, and here they are manning the yards. That is, in fact, the origin of the manning of the rail.
In other words, they're paying tribute there today.
Indeed, that's the salute. And it was done 100 years ago, 200 years ago.
But they have to go up there, you're telling us, in order to get those sails down, in order to sail?
That's true. Those sails need to be, people have to go aloft to those yards to set those sails and to furl them. As you were saying, that was a gruesome business in the dead of night in freezing weather. There's one account of spending an hour and a half to furl one sail in icy weather, having to beat your hands on the sail to keep them from freezing. An extraordinary experience.
And of course today it is designed to feel the sea. A quick correction, I wasn't sure altogether when the Statue of Liberty was going to be open again to the public. It is going to be July the 5th if you were thinking of going to visit the statue again. That is tomorrow, of course, and she will be open in all of her glory tomorrow for people to visit. And you get there from Manhattan or from other places, and we can tell you, having spent some time there, in recent days and weeks, it is a memorable visit, even if you have been there before.
The deck scene of the cadets on board the Amerigo Vespucci, I believe, lining up to show their honor.
The parade of the tall ships is about to begin officially and formally. The President is on Governor's Island, joined by the French President, Francois Mitterrand. ABC News coverage of Operation Sail will continue after this and a word from your local station.
Operation Sail continues. Here now, Peter Jennings.
Well, you're looking at the stage for opening ceremonies. The opening ceremonies for Op Sail are just getting underway now, and you are looking, and let us listen to the Garfield cadets from New Jersey. National class and world class. Cadets from New Jersey. Right across, there's Lee Iacocca. Very few people around this harbor in the last few days have looked as proud as he has. Has told us time and again how many people like you, who perhaps are listening and watching this morning across the country, who have contributed to the restoration of the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, of course, reminding us that people in far-flung corners of the world contributed. Revel?
Well, I think it's a marvelous thing that so many people are participating in this kind of an effort. It is a nationwide effort of preservation, and we're seeing it at sea with all of these vessels. We're seeing it on land with the statue, but we're seeing it in shoreside facilities that make that link between the land and shore. The National Trust for Historic Preservation is one of those organizations that leads the way. They've got 160,000 members around the country who really care about the preservation of our historic structures.
It is quite true that we have not in the recent past been as good about preserving our tall ships or our maritime facilities as other seagoing nations have.
It's true, and one of the curious things, though, we have gotten the fever, and around this country there are ship preservation efforts, and one of the curious things is And I haven't really compared ourselves to other countries, but we preserve ships from other countries. We take the wretched refuse in a maritime sense, and we're preserving it in various ports on both coasts around this country.
What a nice line. The entrance of the state and territorial flags. This is my country.
The 50 state and territorial flags of the United States are being carried by Joint Service Honor Guards from Washington, D.C.
State and territorial flags being paraded on to the stage here on Governor's Island, this island with so much history, occupied by the Dutch and the English.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Reagan, accompanied by the President of the Republic of France and Madame Mitterrand.
President and President Mitterrand will have some considerable opportunity today to talk to each other. You've heard the President Reagan in the last couple of days refer to the possibility of a summit meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev from the Soviet Union. Mr. Mitterrand will leave here and go to the Soviet Union. In just a moment, we will be back to continue the opening ceremonies for Operation Sail and see more of the tall ships. Right back.
ABC's presentation of Liberty Weekend is brought to you by Dole Fruit and Cream Bars, the Van Heusen Company, Dewey Stevens Premium Light, clean, fresh, and 1/3 less calories than ordinary wine coolers, and United States Liberty Coins. Keep Liberty in mint condition with United States Liberty Coins.
Operation Sail about to get formally underway with the presidents of France and the United States. Give you some reminder here of the comparison. In 1678, there were only 18 ships registered in this great port of New York. Today, we don't know how many. We've heard figures of 40,000, including all the small boats. But you can see as the Armada, the parade of tall ships, makes its way up towards Governor's Island, just how many people now in this particular city and from around the world now have access to the sea for pleasure, no longer primarily from trade. And we should also remember that American sailors in the early days of the country were among the finest sailors in the world. And we will, in the course of this day, as the tall ships come up, see American tall ships where young Americans still train in the traditional ways of the sea. On board the somewhat more comfortable presidential yacht, ABC's Sander Van Ocker on the Sequoia. Sandy?
Peter, in view right now, you should have the Coast Guard bark the Eagle, which will lead the procession of tall ships up the river. Now, coming up in a moment, you will see on the starboard side of the bark the clipper Bowden. It's a old Arctic explorer which has recently been rebuilt. On the port side is the Spirit of Massachusetts. And towing behind the Spirit of Massachusetts, you should be able to see a dory trailing behind it. This is an old Gloucester fishing vessel, and this is a mark of respect for the dead when they come into port. And the reason it's trailing is because on the starboard side should have been the Pride of Baltimore, which was sunk coming up from San Juan on May 14th, and the captain was lost on there, Armin Alsasser. And why the people on board of the Spirit of Massachusetts are doing this is because he was the first skipper of the Spirit of Massachusetts, Armin Alsasser, dead, bringing up the Pride of Baltimore. And the people told me on board the Spirit of Massachusetts 2 days ago that they wanted this as a mark of respect. It's a traditional mark of respect for those lost at sea, especially as Captain Alsasser was their first skipper.
Thank you, Sandy. A lot of people in this parade actually hoped that thered be an empty space left for the Baltimore, which, as Sandy told you, was lost at sea in early May. The U.S. Coast Guard's Eagle, in commission in New London since 1946, leads the parade of the tall ships as they come up into New York Harbor. One of the 5 German sail training barks, which this country got from the Germans as reparations after World War II. She has some sister ships, doesn't she, Rebel?
Yes, she does. The Sagres II, which we will see today, is one of her sisters. One Russian ship, the Tavarish, is a sister ship of hers. The Murcia from Romania, which is not here. But the Gorschfach from Germany is another of the sisters. So one of her sisters is here, Sagres II. We'll see her later.
And the Eagle was the host ship for Operation Sail in 1964.
I think one impressive fact is that she was built in 1936 at Bloemenvoss in Hamburg, and the Offenburg, one of the naval vessels that's here representing the German government, was also built in that same shipyard, so that yard is still functioning.
Is that the Blue Nose?
That does look like the Blue Nose from Canada, although it's probably maybe Ernestina. I can't quite tell here.
They are a little difficult, as has been pointed out, for us at least, because they are coming in a line of order, but our cameras are all over the harbor. But she is a schooner, isn't she?
Yes, she is. She's a schooner of the Gloucester fishing type. She'd be 120 feet long or so.
Fished the Grand Banks,
yes,
off
indeed.
New England,
Yep.
and off the coast of Canada.
Yep.
And the Blue Nose, if that is the Blue Nose, is so much a part of Canadian history that it appears on the Canadian dime. And having said all of that, we'll probably have her wrong.
Well, it is a little hard to tell. The flag's very helpful, but not at this moment.
They were fast, these, weren't they, Rebel?
Yes, there's the Canadian flag flying. That should be familiar to you, Peter. So that is definitely the Blue Nose, too. She's a replica of the first Blue Nose. And Blue Nose was built, in fact, not only to fish, but to race. There were races between the Gloucester fishermen and the Canadian fishermen, and she held the record for 20 years.
One of the places that still maintains this tradition of old ships, of course, is Britain. There's no British tall ship in this particular armada today, is there?
No, there isn't. She has a very strong sail training program with vessels like the Sir Winston Churchill and the Malcolm Miller, but there is no tall ship from Britain participating.
The Eagle, there she is again. She makes a couple of long cruises with Coast Guard cadets every summer, and when these tall ships get opposite Governor's Island, we'll get into some order so we can better give you some history of them, tell you something about life on board them. But at the moment, they are still approaching Governor's Island. They have not quite even reached the point where the USS John F. Kennedy is anchored just to the south of Governor's Island, but there are the tugs and the fireboats out. The Eagle is first, the Denmark is second.
The sails that we do see set are the fore and aft sails on those ships. They're staysails, and they can be set when the wind is fairly close to the bow. I mentioned on the nose. That means the wind coming right down on the ship. And
look at the young Coast Guardmen up on the top of the rigging.
Yes, again, they're manning the yards. So we will see on all of the square rig ships, I think, some sails set, but not their square sails at this point.
Have you ever been up one of those things?
I have.
What's it like?
If you have any fear of heights, that's not the place to go.
Good, I shall not go there. We'll be back in just a minute for the beginning of the formal parade of the tall ships. Picture postcard views of New York Harbor as one of the ferries sits on the flanks waiting for the tall ships to come. We apologize if we're confusing you a little bit at the ships. It is in part because we've been taking pictures of them as they have been making their way up from lower New York Bay. When they get opposite Governor's Island, opposite the President's, of France and the United States, we'll get more specific and be somewhat more helpful, I hope, in identifying them for you. There is the Eagle, the Coast Guard ship, making her way now just past the statue in the background. We're waiting to hear from Lee Iacocca, the man who's had so much to do with the restoration of the Statue of Liberty, and from a man named Bus Mosbacher, a name perhaps not familiar to that many Americans, but certainly familiar to anyone who has any connection with sail.
Twice in the 1960s, Emil Mosbacher Jr. commanded the 12-meter yachts defending the America's Cup against Australian challengers. And both times, Buzz Mosbacher skippered the defenders to victory. Twice since then, first in 1976 to celebrate the birth of a nation, and now in 1986 to celebrate the gift of a statue, Mosbacher has commanded Operation Sail, the glittering parade that has filled New York Harbor with floating history. Mosbacher is, clearly, the harbor master of both speed and show. He towers over tall ships, this time perhaps a little reluctantly.
And when some of our fellows who have done this, who have been together since 1962, when the idea first germinated, came and said, let's do it again, I thought they were crazy. I thought they were out of their minds, and I wanted no part of it.
Then Mosbacher remembered New York's mood in July '76.
I don't recall New York City before or since being as friendly a place as it was for a couple of weeks after the 76, during and after the 76 op sale. People singing God Bless America on the subway at 1 o'clock in the morning. People standing in Brooklyn Heights as the Eagle went by singing the Star Spangled Banner. Those things don't happen very often in New York, I don't think.
An oilman, realtor, and once U.S. Chief of Protocol under President Nixon, Mosbacher has been a sailor for almost all of his 66 years. He doesn't sail much anymore, but today, figuratively, Buzz Mosbacher is back at the helm. Dick Schaap, ABC News, New York.
Well, Bus Mosbacher talks about the spirit that this occasion and these ships can evoke, and it is true all around this harbor today. People in Governor's Island, we can see to our left and to our right, are standing 15 and 20 deep, and the harbor is beginning to look just a little like a New York street, or at least the center of it is. They are approaching us now, getting within easy distance of Governor's Island, and let's go over to the opening ceremonies for just a moment and listen to Andy Williams.
Where the grapes of wrath are stored, he hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Andy Williams in New York Harbor. The Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor will be back. ABC's news coverage for Operation Sail after this, and a word from your local station.
And thank you all. It's been said that we Americans count our blessings too seldom, but not this weekend. This weekend we celebrate, my friends, we cut loose. The procession that we're about to witness will be as colorful as fireworks, as majestic as Lady Liberty herself. I hear you. It'll speak to us of the past, of the days when great ships like these dropped anchor in our harbors to unload tea from China, whale oil from open seas, and yes, immigrants from around the world. It'll speak to us of present and future amity between our nation and the many nations that have sent ships here today to lend their beauty, the curve of their hulls, the lines of their masts and rigging as they stand out against the sea, the sky, to our rejoicing. Passing in review today, we see more than 20 of the 30 or so tall ships that are left in the world. The U.S. Coast Guard bark Eagle will lead the procession. Schooners, barks, brigantines, and ketches from more than 30 countries are entering the harbor. Somehow men have always found moving the sight of these vessels of wood and metal and canvas. Indeed, some centuries ago, one writer of Proverbs described as wonderful the way of a ship in the midst of the sea. Perhaps it has something to do with the knowledge that nothing binds sailing ships, nothing holds them back, that they can travel anywhere across the vast and trackless sea. Perhaps indeed these vessels embody our conception of liberty itself, to have before one no impediments, only open spaces, to chart one's own course, to take the adventure of life as it comes, to be free as the wind, as free as the tall ships themselves. It's fitting then that this procession should take place in honor of Lady Liberty. And as the wind swells the sails, so too may our hearts swell with pride at all that Liberty's sons and daughters have accomplished in this, the land of the free. This spectacle has been literally years in the planning. On behalf of the American people, I want to thank Ambassador Bus Mossbacher and his entire operations sales staff for making this international celebration, this stately salute to liberty. And now, Bus, where are you? Come forward. Thank you.
President Mitterrand, Madam Mitterrand, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, so much has been said that there's very little I can add except perhaps to thank the President, because without his very warm and enthusiastic support from day one, and day one was about 3 years ago, the group, this dedicated group who presented Opsail in 1964 and in 1976, each time vowing never to do it again, decided that the centennial of the Statue of Liberty and a salute to liberty was very much in order. But no matter how hard they work and how expert they are, and they are, it could not have been done without the President. So as a small token, Mr. President, from our board of directors and all of the volunteers, and they are all volunteers, may we present to you, sir, this token of our thanks and esteem.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now, sir, with your permission, may we present your Eagle and Elizabeth Dole's Eagle and Opsail 86. I can carry that down.
There's the Eagle, the Coast Guard lead in this parade of tall ships. Revel, remind us a little of her history.
Well, she's a bark. She's a good-sized vessel. It's actually her 50th year. She was built in 1936 as a training vessel for the Germans. Her name was Horst-Vessel at that time. She was a troop carrier, cargo carrier during the war. And curiously enough, during that same time, the Denmark, the second ship to come along, was in this country.
Firing a salute as she comes by, a salute to liberty and a salute to the presidents.
It was after the war that the Coast Guard here was able to take over the Eagle.
somewhat noisier around here as the tall ships come and pay their tribute to the Statue of Liberty, led by the Eagle. 295 feet long in the center of this harbor, built in Germany, now a training ship for the Coast Guard.
21,000 square feet of sail on that ship, which is a lot of canvas. She's named, in fact, after an Eagle that was a revenue cutter back in 1792. That was one of the early revenue cutters in this country, and the Coast Guard grew out of the revenue service. So she has a tradition and a name to carry on that goes back to 1792.
You also remind me she's passing islands where pirates used to be hung. On Liberty Island and on Ellis Island. In early days, they hung pirates. Then they had a crowd in New York Harbor.
This vessel was part of the German Navy during World War II, but was claimed by the Allies as a prize of the war. Since then, she has been the training ship of the United States Coast Guard Academy, and she celebrates her 50th anniversary this year.
She was in sad shape at the end of the war, and when she arrived here, her sails were literally in tatters. It took a major restoration effort by the Coast Guard to put her back into service.
Escorted, as will all the tall ships be, by some of the more famous tugs of New York Harbor. Cannot have a harbor of this size, which can do 51 or 52 million tons of trade in a year, without the tugs to get them in and get them out, and when they're the big ocean liners, push them around if necessary. They'll come by this point on Governor's Island about once every 7 minutes. They'll go up the Hudson River towards the George Washington Bridge, turn around, and in many cases sail down. So at some point in this harbor, we're going to get even a third convergence. We're going to get first the tall ships going up, then the tall ships coming down, the ships of the modern armada here as well.
Escorting the Eagle are the Bowdoin, the only auxiliary schooner ever built in America.
Just getting a view now of the Spirit of Massachusetts, astern of the Eagle, just disappearing off of our screen. One of the escorting vessels, she's on the port flank of the Eagle as she comes up the river.
Let us remind you again, port is left and starboard is right.
When you're facing forward on the ship.
The Eagle, leading, more to come. 23 from a variety of nations. We'll be back in just a moment.
ABC's presentation of Liberty Weekend is brought to you by Newprint from Bristol-Myers. Wendy's, celebrate new crispy chicken nuggets at Wendy's. Wrangler, a legend in jeans, made in the USA. And Lipton Fruit Tea, let it pour.